Okay. She was a small person with a big heart.
And a big mouth.
I had a big mouth. Okay, so good morning, everybody. Thank you for spending some of the day with me today. Last week, we went through the question of whether the establishment of a king was a rishus or a mitzvah. We spoke about the minority opinion and said that was a rishus. Mostly commentators seem to think that it was a mitzvah to appoint a king. And we spoke about the various mitzvot that applied to the king and to the people on how to appoint the king. So today, I want to take you through two different areas of Sefer Shmuel, and the people's request to Shmuel how to have a king, how he deals with it, and ultimately the first king who's appointed is Shaul. Okay, and in his appointment, we'll begin to talk about the qualities that a king needed to have. And we're right from the get-go, if we have enough time, we'll find out where Shaul came up a little bit short. You see, in the seeds of his being appointed as the Melech, you can see already that this was not going to turn out the best way that it could come. So I take from my text, those of you who are watching, listening at home, if you have a Sefer Shmuel, I'm going to be doing Shmuel Aleph, chapter Ches, chapter 8. Chapter 8, all right? Right. And the chapter begins, Vayehi, Kasher Zakein Shmuel. Shmuel became older. Now this is all very relative, because Shmuel did not have a very, very long life. He lived to the ripe old age of only 52. So why that might have been, whether in fact he was old or exactly how he became old, what debilitated him, we don't know. But the Torah refers to him, Kasher Zakein Shmuel. So this takes place a couple of years before Shmuel is ready to, before David HaMelech. By Yosem es Bonav Shoftim Yisrael. He appointed his sons to become judges in Eretz Yisrael. Vishem Beno Habecho Yoel, his oldest son was Yoel. Vishem Mishnehu, and the second son was Aviyah Shoftim Bever Shava. They set up their courts, they did their judging in Be'er Sheva. Okay. Shmuel, we know, came from Ramah, which was a little bit further central to the northern Eretz Yisrael. And Be'er Sheva, we know, is lower, in the southern portion. Okay? All right? Now, there's a difference here between Shmuel. You remember there used to be some sort of a western about some sort of a judge that was a circuit rider. He used to ride around the various places in the West, dispensing justice to various people in different towns. This was Shmuel. Shmuel, for his judgeship, didn't have a court in Ramah, although he lived there. He would spend his time going around Eretz Yisrael from town to town to town, administering justice, listening to people's grievances, and paskening shilas wherever he went. That's how he, conducted his judgeship. 1 second. Well, it's like Ada already has a question, which is good because we made it about 4 minutes into the shir for her first question. And we'll see that the sons of Shmuel were a little bit different. They set up their court in Be'er Sheva, and in order to dispense justice, they had the people come to them. That's where the courthouse was. Very much like today, there's a courthouse. Every town, every county, every government has its area for a courthouse. And if you need justice, that's where you go. Question, Ada?
No, it's a comment that twice in Psukim is mentioned by he. By he is usually bad news.
Okay. All right. So by he is usually bad news. I think you'll see what the bad news is going to be. In many, many instances, the bad news was well, we'll see his sons, and we'll also see whether it was appropriate, because we'll see Shmuel is going to be jumping ahead in the story. We're going to see that Shmuel becomes very, very angry and very, very disappointed at Bnei Israel that they asked for a king. So, right, so that's what the Vayehi is going to be. Didn't turn out so well, his appointment of Shaul, right? So, below Cholchul Vona Bidrachav, as I just explained to you, the two children didn't go in his ways. I told you one of the reasons might have been on how they dispensed the justice. They were sitting in a court rather than traveling around, okay? Vayitu acharei habotza. Now they went after monetary gains, right? Vayiku shochad, right? This is a very, very terrible thing. And we'll see that Chazal in their explanations try to mitigate what exactly was shochad. Didn't take the classic shochad. Vayatu mishpat, and they perverted justice, right? We'll see that it wasn't as terrible. First of all, from one point of view, who wrote Sefer Shmuel? Shmuel himself, correct? And for him to write this about his children, you know, it's not appropriate, you know. I mean, if you have children that you feel are not going on the derech, you don't publicize it in the Sefer, what?
But if he wrote it, he should have said the law of Kubanai. He does not write it in the
All right. So what did the kids do wrong that the Torah, that Shmuel was so harsh on them? Well, one thing, don't say shochad, okay? Shochad means you take bribery to adjudicate. I'll give you the explanation, and you'll see. Did you want to say something? No. I thought you had your hand up to say something. Huh? So what would happen was, in those days, travel was not easy. You know, we all have to admit, travel was not an easy thing to do in those days. I mean, it took a big effort. You had to saddle your donkeys. There was no motels on the road. There was no cars. It took a long time to get there. If you have your court in Beersheba, right, and you're living, say, up in even Yerushalayim or in that area, and you feel, or the Galil, and you feel you have a case that really needs to be adjudicated, okay? It's very, very difficult and very, very expensive in those days, and very time-consuming and very arduous to get onto a donkey and to travel. Took you several days to get to Beersheba. There was no highway number 4 or highway number 1 like there is in Israel. So in many, many cases, people would say, the heck with it, it's just not worth it. And in that case, justice would not be done. Okay.
Does that mean they were the only shoftim in the whole country?
It
doesn't make sense.
Okay. I'm just telling you, okay? Were they only the shoftim? I don't know. Probably, maybe. It's a very good question. I don't know. Okay? All right. All right. The other thing is Shmuel would dispense his justice free of charge. He never took any money like I had a Rav in Staten Island when it came to me, Mechiras Chametz. He never took a dime from Mechiras Chametz, all right? So Shmuel himself never... Shmuel himself never took any charge, never even to cover his expenses when he would travel or wherever he would have to stay. Certainly he had expenses, he had to eat out, whatever he had. Okay? Shmuel's sons, unlike him, took their expenses. They got paid for what they did. All right? Okay. The system of justice was such that it involved more than the justices themselves. The justices, as you know today, till you get to the judge, there's a whole bunch of staff that you have to go through various in the courts. There's clerks and there's receptionists and there's places you have to go to file and get a receipt, etc., etc. Shmuel's sons set up a whole bureaucracy. They set up a whole bureaucracy. Now, who pays for the bureaucracy? Generally, the claimant. The claimant has to Generally, you can't just walk in today and file a case. It costs you money to file a case. Okay, so that, in a sense, was he set up a whole sense of bureaucracy, and people had to pay money to file their cases or to get justice. All right, so that might have been the bought side. That might have been the money that they might have taken. He had to set up. They had to pay all these civil servants. All right. I understand. It's a very, very harsh judgment that Shmuel writes of his children. All right. Okay. Others say that they would use their position of influence. Shmuel, we all know, was a Levi, right? Shmuel was a Levite. Such a Levite is entitled to various masa, various tithes, right? His sons suggested, because they were influential people, they jumped to the head of the pecking order. And when it came time to give Misa to the Levi, tithes to the Levi, they jumped up in a situation of importance. They felt they were very important people, so they took first. They used the pressure to get their Masa first. All right, these are all various So Vayikbetzu, because of this particular situation, was it this situation or not? I don't know. This might have been the straw that broke the camel's back. Vayikbetzu kol zikna Yisrael. So all the people of Israel gathered by Yavoel Shmuel or Ramoso. So they went to Shmuel in Ramot, where he lived. By Yomurei Love, and they said to him, Hine ato zarkanto. Very nice way to approach the Gadol Hadol. You're an old man, right? You're an old man, right? Another very nice statement of respect to him. Your children are not going in your ways. They're not following you. Ato, now what we want to correct this situation, Simo Lanu Melech, okay? Appoint to us a king, Simulanu Melech, the Shoftenu, to judge us, Kechol Hagoyim. Now, the request, okay, by Yera Hadova B'Einei Shmuel, that this request now by Yera displeased, but it was worse than displeasing. He couldn't. This was terrible. This was a terrible request that Shmuel got. Kasha Omru to Lanu Melech L'Shoftenu. That the people came out with this particular statement that they were requesting a king. By Yispalel Shmuel Hashem. Shmuel was so vexed and so bothered by this particular request that immediately he started tefillah. Cheryl, wake up.
I'm up.
Okay. I'm sorry. All right.
Marty,
All right.
Can I
Okay.
ask you a question?
So
Yeah.
let me just throw out a question.
Can I ask you a
Throw out
question?
a question, okay, which should concern us. We just spent last week learning that it was a mitzvah, okay, that it was a rishus or a mitzvah, whatever you want to call it, to appoint a king. Now the people have come forward, and like it says in Devarim, they've come and they've asked for a king. Why is Shmuel so upset? Why is Shmuel so angry that he has to go and he has to daven to Hashem? Why is Shmuel so angry? Let's discuss. Bob, I have 7 different answers that I found in Mefarshim. Let's see how many we can get. Bob?
Their motivation.
What was wrong with their motivation?
They're not asked for the right reason.
What reason were they asking for?
They're asking, I think, purely to be saved from a physical situation which Hashem gives them. They weren't asking to be saved from a spiritual situation. Something that
Okay, so Bob is basically correct. He hit on 2 of the 7. Anybody, Rita, you wanted to say something?
I guess the whole thing that we have done, no, maybe it's not that good. In other words, this is not comes knowledge, comes education. Here, when somebody fails to say, and makes choice about it, whether it comes to, in other words, I cannot choose a king that is something to make sure that everything is.
So where were you getting all of this from? All right. Anybody listening in want to unmute themselves and possibly give us all a reason to share? Why was Shmuel all of a sudden so upset and so angry that he thought this was probably the worst thing that people could have done was to ask for a king?
You can't hear me.
Obviously, we saw that they were not happy with what he's doing.
Okay, so Ada said, well, they requested it as a grievance, right? There's a grievance. There was something wrong with Shmuel and something wrong with the way Shmuel was. Okay, all right. So that's another one. So let me run through briefly, or not so briefly, some of the 7 reasons that I found in the various Mefarshim. I'll give you the Mefarish that says it. All right. Okay. Rambam addresses my question, our question that we're dealing with here, and explains that the request for a king was sinful because, like Ada said, the people expressed it as a grievance. Okay? They did not petition for a king because it was a mitzvah in the Torah, right? But because they had grown tired of Shmuel's leadership, right? The Ramban takes the matter further and explains that presenting such a request during Shmuel's lifetime was a affront not only to the kavod of Shmuel, who was the Gadol Hador, but also to the honor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in whose name Shmuel served, right? And we'll see later on, this is what Hashem will say to Shmuel, don't you be upset, they're rejecting me also, okay? That's number 1, all right?
And also, it says, Lord, come as to him of this.
Right, okay. Number 2, the Meiri. Meiri asks the same question, and he says that the people petitioned Shmuel for a king not only after Shmuel had grown old and it's clear his son was not fit to fill the role, all right? He says they were not really judging. You can't say that's bad because Shmuel was, in fact, getting old and the situation of justice. So you can't blame him for that. He says the people did wrong because they asked for a king prematurely. What was the prematurely asking for a king? When we went through this last week, we did what the mitzvah was. Certain conditions had to exist, which didn't exist. Okay? The country was not conquered yet. Okay? The country, B'Shavta V'Rishta Ba, B'Omarta Osimolai Melech. So the conquest of Eretz Yisrael was not complete, and therefore what they were asking was not according to the Torah, but it was premature. Also, the people knew that the monarchy was going to be reserved at the appropriate time for Shevet Yehuda, right? And those conditions for Shevet Yehuda did not exist either for them to take over, okay? Okay, number 3, others. They say this is others, I know, okay?
That's enough reason already.
Others take a different approach, all right? And explain that the problem in the people's request lay in the type of governance they sought from this new form of leadership. A purpose of a king really is to enforce Torah law and to run the country with regard to Torah law, all right? Here they wanted people wanted a king to rule over them, kichol hagoyim, okay? Secularly, we need a king who's going to have the appropriate secular laws. This is not the purpose of a Jewish king. They wanted this king to institute a body of customs and norms that would put them on an imagined par with our idolatrous neighbors. Okay? Number 4, they sought a king for the purpose of leading them in battle. Purpose of a king, a Jewish king, is not to lead them in battle. Until this particular time, okay, the Shoftim, okay, didn't have standing armies, didn't need standing armies. I told you, I think last week when we ran through the history was repetitive. A country would attack them. The people would realize something was wrong. They would daven, they would do tshuva, and Hashem would send a refuah in the form of a shofet. The shoftim never marshaled large armies, except in maybe in one case with Devorah and Barak. But things were done without large armies. HaKadosh Baruch Hu interfered, now I should say interfered, but interfered in a positive way. He was very, very present in the history of Bnei Israel and in having Bnei Israel defeat their enemies. Now they were asking for something less, that this involvement of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in history should now devolve upon a king. The king would lead them now, no longer HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? Okay. Next, okay. Another answer focuses on one extra word that the people used in their request to Shmuel, l'shaftenu. The word l'shaftenu, okay, to judge us. They wanted a king to judge them like non-Jewish kings. L'shaftenu, right? This was their mistake. All right, next.
But wait a minute. You really need both. You need the shofet, and the melech. You do the other.
But they weren't asking that one. They weren't asking for that. They weren't asking for somebody to judge them by Torah law. They were asking somebody who would judge them by secular law. Okay? Okay, the Sifri, we said that they asked for it too early. The Kli Yakar says that the thing was Osimo Alai Melech, was what the Torah says. And here they said Tenor Lonu Melech. What's the difference? Osimo Alai and Tenu Lonu. Big difference. Okay? Osimo Alai means placed above me, Alai above me, right? Okay, so that the king would be, in fact, superior to them, which is the way a king had to be. And here they were saying, Tenu Lonu, give us a king. In other words, we'll get a king and we'll see what we have to do with the king. Okay? Ada doesn't like this, but we'll go on. All right? Okay? The difference is that when the Torah mandates asking for a king, it means that the king should be above the people and they should be subservient to him. However, they did not want to be subservient to the king. Rather, they wanted a king to serve them and fight their wars for them. Hence, they requested a king for us. Okay? So, Ada's difference in argument is with the Kli Yakar. All right? All right. Okay. The Radak says the error was they asked for a king like all the nations. So we have a number of reasons why Shmuel should have been angry or was angry. Vayom Hashem el Shmuel, moving on in the text, I'm up to pasuk number 7. Vayom Hashem el Shmuel, Shma b'kol oam l'chol asher yomu elecha. Listen to them, okay? Kilo oscha ma'asu. They're not being disrespectful or rejecting you. Ki osi ma'asu mimloch alehem. They're rejecting me by asking for a secular type of a king, and a king that would fight battles, and a king that would judge them the way all the other people, nations in the world were judged, means that they were rejecting Hashem, but not Shmuel. All right? Okay. So, this is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Asher asu miyom elosi osam mitzrayim v'yad hayom hazeh v'yazvuni v'yavdu Elohim acherim kein hemo osim gam loch. Hashem is saying this is not the first time that this has happened that Bnei Israel over the centuries since I took them out of Egypt. They've done this before, so we should be used to it. What? Right. Okay. V'yato shma b'kolam. Listen to them. Listen to them. Okay. Ah ki ha'eto id bohem. However, I want you to issue them a warning. V'gadet lahem. Talk to them. Tell them. Mishpat hamelech asher yimloch aleim. Just exactly, if you want to have a king and you want to have a secular king, okay, just exactly what that's going to imply, what the consequences of your asking for them. Okay? Yom Shmuel as kol divrei Hashem Elohim, Hasholim ito melech. Okay? Right? So now Shmuel is going to talk to the people. He's going to tell them that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is very, very upset with their request. But if you want it, Hashem says I should give it to you. But I'm going to warn you now what the king is going to do. And if we look at the government today, even the United States government, will see, okay, what was considered to be very, very difficult in biblical times is now very, very commonplace for a government to do. By Yomer, he says, Zeya Mishpat HaMelech Hashem Yiloch Aleichem. This is what the king's going to do. This is what the king can do. You want to have a king to fight your wars? As B'neichem Yikach, he's going to take your children. He's going to institute forced service in the armed forces. We have a draft today, or we had a draft for many, many years, right? Huh? V'samlo merkavto for Rushov, v'rodzu lifnei merkavto. Okay, he will take his sons to be among his riders, his retinue, his soldiers, or in the king in those days, you just saw it lahavdil with Prince Philip, right? The pomp and circumstance. The king would move around with pomp and circumstance. So before he came, he had to have a bunch of riders with beautiful horses to announce that he was coming, and he would have runners with trumpets and et cetera, okay? And the king was going to be able to draft these people to do these kinds of things, right? Uncle Sam wants you, right? Uncle King Shaul wants you, okay? Velosum lo sorei alofim. He was going to make a hierarchy of officers, okay? Sorei alofim, sorei chamishim. He was going to have sergeants and lieutenants and captains and majors and generals, okay? Lacha rosh charish, okay? And he would need people the king would have lands. He would have people plowing his land because the king wasn't allowed to go out and do manual labor. It wasn't covered for the king, okay? And to plow his land, to reap his harvest, okay? He would need people to service his chariots, to make his chariots, to take care of his horses. Okay. Now, Yespino Seichem and your daughters. Okay. He would take to be, perfumers or to be apothecaries or. Huh? Yeah. All right. All right. Okay. Cooks, bakers, right? But tabachos, leophos, cooks and bakers. King needs a retinue. He needs a household. Okay. So king had the power to draft women into doing these things. All right. All right. He will take your best fields. Okay? He will take your olives and he will give it to his servants. Right. The King of England has barons and he has knights and he has royalty. Where did they get all that stuff from? King gave them all their palaces and stuff like that, right? Okay. He will put taxes on you. He'll tax your produce, okay? Okay, he needs to somehow support his court people. Where is he going to get the money from? From taxes. He's going to raise your taxes. Okay? He's going to take your best young men, and he's going to take your animals, whatever it is. The king has a right to put certain requirements on the people. Anda? Look like you had a question. Okay. Ultimately, you're going to become enslaved by your taxation. Right? And we know that happened many, many times, correct? Right. And what's going to happen ultimately? The feeling you're going to be so feeling of being I guess, enslaved or being, put upon. You're not going to like what the king does. You're going to start to yell and scream and cry for relief. All right? V'lo yana Hashem eschem b'yomahu. Kadosh Baruch Hu's not going to answer you. Right? So he's projecting a very, very dire consequence, a very bleak picture he's pointing. Why? I guess this is his last stab at trying to convince the people not to do this, that the time is not right. However, people didn't want to listen to Shmuel, right? And they said, no, we heard everything you said. No, we don't agree with you. Again, okay? We want a king to be over us, right? They changed some of the language, but we want a king, right? Okay. They felt, I guess, that without a king, the hardships would be even greater than the hardships that Shmuel was portraying to them would happen. Okay? So, in spite of everything, they still are insisting that they want to be like Kechol HaGoyim. They want to be like everybody else. Right? And we know that Bnei Yisrael was not put on the face of this earth to be like everybody else. Ushvatenu Malkenu, all right? And our king should judge us. Still insisting that they want the king, okay? They feel it's better to have a king to lead them into battle than to have the current situation. Vayomer Hashem el Shmuel, so with all of this still going on, ultimately Hashem says to Shmuel, Shma b'kolam, listen to them. If this is what the people want, give it to them. Yimlachto lahem melech, find for them a king, designate for them a future king. Vayomer Shmuel Anshe Yisrael, he says to the people of Israel, L'chu ishli iro, I'll take care of it. I want you all to go home, and I will figure out, and I will search, and I will come up with a way to get a king for you.
That's right. They still need a separate shofet and a separate melech. They are two different functions. Shofet,
So Ada is insisting that the people did nothing wrong, that they wanted a king. Okay. So now Ada is going to explain to us her own reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu was so angry and Shmuel was so angry. If the request was so proper and so just, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu, why was he angry, and why was Shmuel angry?
The next thing is because they wanted to be Kechol HaGoyim.
Okay, whatever it was.
No, because it didn't say that they are going to listen to God's way and do the mitzvot according to what they want.
So why was HaKadosh Baruch Hu so angry? The way you're portraying it to us, it's not so terrible.
You should have said the condition. If you want to have a king, okay. But he has to follow
Well, okay, so we'll agree to disagree, because I have to move on, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Shmuel thought that this was terrible, the way they asked. Okay? Okay. Hashem has consented to provide Bnei Yisrael with a king, and he authorizes Shmuel to appoint Shaul, who is in fact worthy. All right. And he was told, okay. All right. So by Shem Gila, I think am I skipping yet? I need to skip a little bit. I think I asterisk where we're skipping to. Go to the next page, number 2. Right, you got it? So Hashem Gilas Ozen Shmuel Yom Echad. All right. Lifnei Vo Shaul Lemor. There's a whole story about Shaul, introducing us to Shaul. He was, it's really not appropriate to the story. I don't want to leave it. His uncle had lost a couple of donkeys, and they sent Shaul to look for the donkeys, and Shaul was wandering around looking for donkeys. So Hashem Golas Ozen Shmuel Yom Echad Lefnei Bo Shaul Lemor. Before Shaul was going to come to look for the donkeys in Ramah, Hashem's what should we call it, opened up or got in touch with, sent a communication to Shmuel saying, At this time tomorrow, right? Eshlach elecha ish me'eretz Binyamin. A man is going to show up. We all know he's going to be Shaul, but a man will show up from Eretz Binyamin, Mushachtal and Nogid. Okay? Anything catch you here? Mushachtal and Nogid? What should catch you? What's the difference between a Nogid and a Melech? So why don't we say Melech? Mushachtal l'Nogid. A Nogid is a prince or a leader. A Nogid is a leader, but not particularly a Melech. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Mushachta l'Nogid, al Ami Yisrael, Moshiach Ami b'yad Pelishtim. Okay, so again, he's using the word Nogid, not Melech, right? We should ask ourselves why. As we discuss Shaul, okay, is he a true Melech or is he a Nogid? What is HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying? Ki ro'isi as ami ki bo'at sa'akos ha'olai. Because I see that my people are troubled and they want to have a leader. So, okay, we're going to get this man Shaul. And Shaul has become a Nogid. Not a Melech, but originally he's introduced as a Nogid. Prince, a leader. Okay. So Hashem seems at this point to be giving Shaul a limited duty and responsibility. Okay, only that of defeating the Pelishtim. It's not saying here HaKadosh Baruch Hu that this would be a king to judge them and to be over them, but his Shaul's role was going to be initially to defeat the Pelishtim. Right? So, Shmuel the next day raw as Shaul. So Shmuel has contact with Shaul. Hashem anohu. This is the one, Hashem says, this is the person that I decided that's going to help my people. Okay? But Yatzor Bi'ami is not exactly help. What does Yatzor mean? It's more like to restrain. Restrain. You know, my people are going off the deep edge. So this will be the person that will be the answer to their grievances, so to speak. Vayigash Shaul of Shmuel. First contact between the two. What? Okay, that's right. Okay, Vayigash Shaul et Shmuel. B'stoch hashar vayomer hagidon li eze beis horoah. Where is the house of the seer? Okay. He's asking for Shmuel with a funny kind of appellation. He's calling him not Shmuel, but Beis Roel. Shmuel was a Navi, and he knew that that the Navi lived in that particular town. Remember, he's still looking for donkeys. He's on a mission to find some donkeys that were lost. Spelled with an ayin. Roel was with an olive. Okay? Right? Vayan Shmuel or Shaul. So Shmuel answers Shaul, Vayomer Anochi Horoeh. Shows you how Hashem here judges the words that come out of the mouth of a Gadol. Okay? Shmuel says, I am Anochi Horoeh. I am the seer. I am the one that sees. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he said nothing wrong, but he should have said Anochi Shmuel instead of Anochi Horoeh. Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to make this later on. We'll learn when we talk about the appointment of David. When Shmuel ultimately goes to Yishai and he's looking for his sons, which one to coronate, which one to anoint, he can't find them. He doesn't know. He asks, is it this son? Is it this son? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is basically saying, aha, you see, you're such a roer, you should have known which one of Yishai's sons, but I'm going to punish you for that. This was his so-called, in quotes, punishment. You're not such a roer. I'm just saying a gadol has to be a great person, has to be very, very careful on how he responds. All right, it was an element of godless, of being too self-important. I'm the seer.
Previously, responded to Shaul's question.
He could have answered it by saying, Anochi, I'm the man you're looking for. Right? He didn't have to.
Anochi Amoed is exactly the answer.
He could have said, Anochi, I'm the man you're looking for.
As long as he answered exactly the question.
Well, apparently there was. So how come when Shmuel went to find David, he couldn't find him? He wasn't, because he wasn't a rower. Hashem took it away from him because he responded improperly here.
Hashem took it away later, but at the time,
All right, next, yeah.
Okay, how come somebody from Yemen, not from Yehuda?
Okay, because Hashem was saying you want a king. It's not the appropriate time now. I'm going to give you a leader, all right? The leader didn't necessarily, ultimately, Bnei Yisrael was able to have a leader and even a king from any Shevet. Once Yehuda, the king came from Yehuda, that was it. Once the first king like David was appointed from Yehuda, there could be no kings from any other tribe. Right? Remember, the request for a king is premature. The request for a king is premature. I don't understand your question. What about Yaakov's brother? Bracha. Okay. The request for a king was premature. Every shofet that was before that, every tribe had a shofet. There were 15 shoftim that came from 12 different tribes. Okay. The permanent, what Yaakov's blessing was that the permanent kingship was going to come from Yehuda. And once the first king from Yehuda came, there could be no other kings, right? The fact that Shaul was made king, we said it was a premature appointment and it wasn't meant to last. And the fact remains, it didn't last. Okay. So Vayikach Shmuel es Pach Hashemen. Okay. Vayitzok Rosho. Okay. So Shmuel takes a Pach Shemen. Later on, we'll learn the difference of how a king of Yehuda was anointed, how David was anointed, and how. Okay. Now, Shaul's going to be anointed twice. Hopefully, we can get to it today. Yeah, Vayikach Shmuel es Pach Hashemen. Vayitzok Rosho Vayishokeyu. He anoints him with some oil. Vayomer haloki mishachachko Hashem al nachal otso lemelech. Oh no, it says lenogid, right?
yeah, what is this?
Oh. Huh?
What is this?
What is it? What do you think?
That is not really a king.
Okay, right. So this is the first anointment of Shaul. He becomes king, but this is something that Shmuel has done privately. He's done privately. It's one-on-one. He sees him, he meets him, tells him, you're going to be the nugget, you're the new leader. Boom, he puts the oil on him.
After Hashem told him.
Huh?
That's only because Hashem told him.
Correct. So now, okay, maybe Shmuel did this on his own. He's got to satisfy the people. Maybe the people will come to Shmuel and says, who are you to appoint this particular person? You didn't run it by us. We didn't vet him. We need congressional approval. You want to send it to a committee? You can't just go out and appoint a king, right? So he gives him 3 signs. Okay, I'll run through it very quickly because they're really not important to the story. So he tells him 3 things. Okay, all right. When you leave today, you're going to find 2 men by the tomb of Rachel, by Kever Rachel. Okay, and they're going to say to you that the donkeys that you're looking for have been found. That's sign number 1. Sign number 2, you're going to go to next to a place, Elon Tabor. You're going to find 3 men going up to worship HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to Beisel, Echad Nosei Shlosha Gedoyim, Yechad Nosei Shlosha Kikros Lechem, Yechad Nosei Never Yoin. You're going to find 3 guys. One's going to be carrying 3 goats, another's be carrying 3 loaves of bread, another's be carrying a flask of wine. Okay? They're going to say hello to you, right? They're going to give you 2 loaves of bread, all right? He's trying right now to give some signs to Shaul what's going to happen to him in the next couple of days to convince him that yes, he is that the man that's appointing him has some power to do this, that he's a Navi that he could see, and that this is not a joking appointment, that this is an appointment for a Nugget, and here's the signs that I'm giving you in advance. After that, you're going to go to the hill of God. Where there the captains of the Pelishtim are, right? The forgot the Chevel Neviim Yodemi Aboma, the Fam Naval Besofa Khalil Bechino, the Hemo Misnabim. You're going to find a few Neviim there. People will be carrying harps and drums and cymbals, all right? V'tzolcha Alecha Ruach Hashem, and there will come upon at that time, will rest upon you Ruach of Hashem. It's not based on Imam Nefatul Yishacher. When the third sign comes true, you're going to finally learn that you're going to have a Ruach Hashem is going to settle over you, and you're going to be a different person.
Why does Shimon have to give all this money? Isn't it enough to say, Hashem told me that you are the man? And
what happens if Shaul doesn't believe him? When we meet Shmuel, we'll ask him why he did this, all right? Okay. Yerad Tovnei Gilgal, okay, right? And from there, and this is going to be a very, very key sentence, because in this sentence here is going to be the seeds as to one of the reasons why Shaul is going to lose his kingship. He says, Yerad Tovnei Gilgal, go down before Gilgal. And I'm going to meet you 7 days from now. I'm going to meet you in the town of Gilgal, and together we're going to make sacrifices. Okay? Okay. Tochal, he says to him, wait. I want you to wait for me in Gilgal. I will be there in 7 days' time. Okay, all right. I will be there in 7 days' time, right? And we'll see that Shaul this doesn't do this. We're going to see. Let's keep this in mind. I don't know. Maybe we'll get to it next year. You're right. Okay. Kavnoso Shikmal Olachas Mim Shmuel Ayafochlo Kim Lev Acher Vayavol Losas Well Bayomahu. And all these signs came true. Right? All these three simonim, all these signs that Shmuel said that was going to happen, happened.
So what do you mean I can't confirm this?
What's the matter, Ada? Huh? This is just a narrative. It's happened.
What do you mean?
What is your problem?
What do you mean by Hashem changed who? Shaul's house?
Yes. Shaul. Hayafok lo Elokim leiv acher. Hayavohu kol haosas u'ela b'yamahu. Hashem said when these Shmuel said to him, when these osos come, you're going to be like a new person. So now we're just saying these things happened, and he became a new person. Okay? He finally came to Givor. B'nei kol chevel and the neviim l'krosav v'tislach alav ruach elokim v'yisnabei b'socham. What happened? He saw the neviim there in Gilgal. So vayehi, and it happened. Kol yodo me'itmo shoshom, and all who knew Shaul from previous days, vayiru v'hinei in neviim nibar. I skipped. I'm on sentence 11. It's chapter 10, sentence 11. Vayehi kol yodei me'itmo shoshom. Everybody who knew Shaul from previous times, from previous days, v'hinei neviim, and all of a sudden they find he's hanging out with a different class of people. He's among the neviim, Nibar, and he's prophesizing whatever the neviim was saying. What's going on here with Ben Kish? Hagam Shol ben Nebiim, and Shol reached the status where he can be considered amongst the Nebiim. Okay. Therefore, it became a proverb, a marshal, Hagam Shol ben Nebiim. Whenever you see somebody who's putting allegedly on ears, you're saying, "Oh, is he also amongst the Nebiim?" Skipping now to 17. Yitzhak Shmuel chapter 10. I'm skipping several psukim. I'm going down to 17. Okay. Yitzhak Shmuel Sa'om Hashem HaMitzpah. Now has to remember he's only anointed him privately. He has to anoint them publicly. This is what the people wanted. So in the 7 or 8 minutes left, we're going to go through how Shmuel anoints Shaul. Yitzhak Shmuel Sa'om Hashem HaMitzpah. So Shmuel gets word out how he did it. I don't know. CNN, email, shul bulletin. I don't know. But he gets all the people somehow together in Mitzpah. Vayomer el Bnei Yisrael. He says to Bnei Yisrael, Ko amar Hashem Elokei Yisrael, Anochi Alesi as he's talking Mitzrayim. He's going to review a little bit of history as his opening part of his speech. I saved you from Mitzrayim. And I saved you from all the kings and all that tried to oppress you. Today you have rejected HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Asher Moshiach Lochem Mikoro Oseichem, Mitzvah Oseichem, V'atomelo Ki Melech Tosim Aleinu. You've rejected Hashem by asking for a king. V'ator Es Yatzvu L'fnei Hashem L'Shiftechem L'Elvechem. You're all gathered here together now. Let's see what's going to happen. Vayikrav Shmuel as Kol Shiftei Yisrael. So, Yaakov is here. He had a lottery. Not that he got them close. Yaakov, the Torah translates it to Reportion. Translators that Shmuel put the names of all the tribes in a box in the form of a lottery. And he reached with his hand into this box and he grasped a name. And it was the name of the tribe of Binyamin.
What is it going to make a lot of it? Hashem told him this is the guy I want to be.
He has to do this. He has to do this to convince the public. He has to do this to convince the public. So he's having a public lottery so that everybody should see that this was done openly, fair, and square. Right? When you play the Powerball, does somebody tell you what the numbers are? Or do you have some sort of a show where they publicly draw the number?
Yeah, but this was my question. Who is it going to draw?
Okay. Shmuel made use of the lottery to demonstrate that it was HaKadosh Baruch Hu who selected Shaul, not Shmuel himself. Right? So by Yaakov Shevet Binyamin Lemishpachosav. So now he has Shevet Binyamin, but there's a lot of families there. Who in Shevet Binyamin? Okay, but he loched Mishpachas HaMatri, the family of Matri was the next one that was chosen. By loched within the family of Matri, there are a number of people, so he has to go to a lottery for the third time. By loched Shaul ben Kish, and Shaul's name came out. By Yavakshuhu, so they looked for him. They went looking for him to tell him, "You are the winner. You are the king. We need to anoint you." Okay, Lo Nimsa, and he wasn't found. And here will be another reason why Shaul's kingdom ultimately fails. Well, Shaul was a flawed leader. By Shaul Lu'od B'Hashem. Okay, and they're asking, "Hey, Shaul's name is out here. Where is he?" Okay. Now he's hiding somewhere in the cloakroom, in the coat room, or he's in the bathroom, or he's not around. In other words, Shaul was at this point trying to portray himself as somebody that was very, very humble. He didn't want the cover allegedly, and he was hiding. He didn't want to take, he was showing a king of Israel. Shmuel had already anointed him. He also had a new ruach, okay? He was giving some level of prophecy. At that point, when the lottery was held, and it came out to be Shaul, Shaul should have gladly accepted, okay? It was a false show of humility, right? I mean, they tell a story about Winston Churchill. Somebody once said to Winston Churchill, describing somebody, all their qualities, and he's also very, very humble. And Churchill said, yes, I know, and he's got a lot to be humble about, right? So they tell the same story with Shaul. Shaul should not have been humble at this point. What was he doing hiding in the cloakroom or in the pantry among the kalim, whatever he was doing? Huh? Vayarutzu vayikachu. Now, vayikachu is generally against somebody's will, right? They take somebody against somebody's will. He had to be forced out of his hiding place. And they brought him into all the people. Apparently, the only something outstanding about Shaul was from the shoulders up, he was taller than everybody else. So he was a very, very spectacular human being physically, right? And he stood shoulders and above everybody else. Huh? Vayomer Shmuel kol Ari Isem Asher Bocha Bo Hashem Ki Ein Kamo B'Chol. Now here you take a look. Here's the guy. This is the guy, right? Vayoru Kol Vayomu Yechi HaMelech. The people start yelling, "Long live the king!" Right? Long live the king. Vayedaber Shmuel Oamel Es Mishpat HaMlucha. So he reviews again the halachas that we did last week, the rules of being the king. Vayechtov Basefer, and he wrote them all down in some sort of a book. Vayanach Lefnei Hashem, Vayeshalach Shmuel Es Kol Oam Ish Leveso, and he says, everybody go home. V'gam Shol Holach Leveso Givoso, Vayelch Limo Achayel Asher Naga Elokim Libam. Right? And those people that wanted to start following Shaul HaMelech, immediately he had some sort of a retinue, followers, they went home. All right? There were some bad guys around. And this should be somebody who wants to become a shul president. Somebody else. No, listen what happens here. He's just been appointed as king. Everybody saw that it came from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The guy was just anointed as president, or he just became the rabbi of the shul. So, this guy is going to help us. Who is this guy? Right? They dissed him immediately. Right? How many times we get a rabbi, we got a president of the shul. He's been president for 2 weeks, and already he's no good. He's no good. People don't want him, right? We do this to all our leaders. We have, we got the gabbai, the new shul gabbai, sitting here. Fortunately, nobody has yet said he's a lousy gabbai. But it won't be too long. So here's the example. So, Vayehi Kamach Harish is another fault, again, of Shaul, right? A king is not supposed to be mochel his koved. We learned that last time, right? A king. So as soon as these people were, morid b'malchus, or what do you call it, revolted against the king, who were expressing publicly bad feelings about the king, Shaul had the obligation, halachically, to do something, but he does nothing. So we found out already very underhandedly 3 particular reasons why Shaul's not going to be a successful king. Okay?
Marty, so these are the people that come
I
back
have a possible
and sort of
ordinance.
influence him in a negative way for the,
Not influence. Well, no,
when it came to a guy, it was
no. Agag was an inherited trait. An inherited trait. He listened to the people. Okay. All right. A thing. This will probably be the last year for a while because I have some family